Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, welcome to another episode of the 33 Fuel podcast. My name is Warren. I'm one of the co-founders here at 33 Fuel, and it gives me great pleasure today to welcome Mr. Will Girling to the show. Will is Head of Performance Nutrition for World Tour Pro Cycling Team EF Pro Cycling. But his background, I believe, gives him a unique perspective on all facets of performance nutrition, and most importantly, how to match your performance goals around your nutrition with something that is achievable, sustainable, and healthy. And Will knows this not just from a professional theoretical knowledge, he knows it from personal practical knowledge. He struggled with his weight as a kid. He then lost that weight through his own research, study, and work, but he didn't do it very healthily. He had struggles with eating disorders. He then took himself towards strongman competition. So while he is working in pro cycling, Will is not your average pro cycling shape. He's about the size of 3 pro cyclists stuck together into one giant strongman form. Not to say he can't knock it about a bit on a bike either. But what I'm saying is this breadth of discipline and knowledge means that the way Will is able to understand, explain, and approach nutrition for performance, I believe is both unique and really, really valuable. There's so much in here for anybody who is looking to maintain or improve powerful eating habits for the performance goals that you have in your life, but doing it in a way that is healthy, psychologically, physically, that is sustainable, that doesn't mess with your social life. It's a question of balance, and so many gems. For example, Will talks about the importance of language around food. Change your language, change your approach. So should you call something good or bad? That simple change can unlock a ton. I love another approach of his, which is the ability to eyeball a meal. If you've worked in nutrition as I have for a long time, you have that innate ability to kind of understand by looking at a meal roughly where the calories, fats, proteins, carbs and everything are, and roughly how to balance out your diet over the week. But it's a skill that takes years, and it's kind of absorbed when you work in the field. But when you're trying to approach this externally, it can be very difficult. Will has some great shortcut tips on how anyone can build that skill. And also we talk about the unreality of the images that we see that are held up as the paragons of human performance, whether that be a high performance bodybuilder on competition day, whether it be a Tour de France cyclist, whether it even be a movie star. What you are seeing is a perfect snapshot of a single day or perhaps a single hour of someone's life. Even a Tour de France cyclist will not maintain their unnaturally low weight all season, the same way a bodybuilder doesn't maintain an unnaturally low amount of body fat all season. Boxers, look at how they fluctuate between fights. The point is, we see these images, we desire to attain them. They're not necessarily healthy. They're not even necessarily correct. So look, so much coming up here. Really hope you get as much out of this as I did. It was a real pleasure talking with Will, and just totally fits with our mission at 33 Fuel, which is giving you the best possible tools to improve your own performance to whatever level you want to achieve. And we do that through sharing great content like this for free across our blog, on this podcast, on our YouTube channel, across our social media. We also do it every day in store at 33fuel.com, where we make, produce and supply the finest natural sports nutrition known to man. So do go and check out the store, but not before you've enjoyed this conversation with Mr. Will Girling. So Will, thank you so much for making the time on what could just be the hottest day of the year at midday to not be a mad dog and Englishman going out in the midday sun, but to hole up in your office and share some time and some of your great knowledge with us on the podcast today. Thank you.
Thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be here.
Very good to have you. I understand you'll be making the most of the sun later, getting out on the bike, which is a bold call in that sort of heat.
Oh, it's good though. You get a good sweat on. It's going to be enjoy it the most, right? As I get cooked and probably look like my red jersey that I'll be wearing.
We could dive into a whole show here on electrolytes, hydration, everything like that. But after the chat we've had, I mean, maybe we'll save that for another episode because I think there's so much to talk about before we even get to that.
Yes, I've got all the bits that you sent over here, so I'm excited to go through them.
Well, as a place to start, I think I wanted to go into your journey into nutrition and your background in your own food and training, because that's been a hell of a journey on its own, which would have informed a huge amount before you even got to the professional side.
Yeah, definitely. So I guess to try and make it not too long of a story, but I was quite an obese child up until I was like a young teenager, and then I wanted to make changes and decided to lose weight. But as a teenager, I kind of ended up having some bulimic tendencies and having a poor relationship with food like that. And as I grew and then got a career and so on, I became a personal trainer. And within personal training, nutrition definitely started to become the thing that was people struggled with the most outside of a workout at the gym. And I really focused on that, and I got into it also from like I guess a body composition point of view, and did the whole prepping for a show kind of thing. And we spoke about then that those obsessive tendencies of having to weigh everything, can't going out for a meal because you can't weigh it, and all these kinds of things. So then having a poor relationship with food at the other end of the spectrum, and then continuing through that journey, and ultimately doing like my master's degree and my postgrad diploma and so on in nutrition, and understanding it to a level where you don't need to worry about it and you don't need to stress about food. And I mean, that'd be me and my background with nutrition. And then sporting wise, I've competed at Strongman, I've competed in cycling, and trained for some pretty big events as well myself.
Well, it's an interesting balance. I mean, on the one hand, you've gone from having more weight than you wanted. You've then discovered an unhealthy relationship with food, albeit you lost that weight.
Mm,
And then there's the bulimic tendencies. Then you get to the bodybuilding. So quite literally, you grew and
yeah.
transformed body composition and everything like that. But the unhealthy result on the other side, where suddenly life becomes impossible, where everything must be controlled. How did you personally find the journey towards letting go of that control? Was it through education that got you to the point where now it's a sweet spot that I think so many people would like to be in, even if their journey's not as extreme as yours or their goals are not as extreme as, say, a professional athlete? A healthy
Yeah.
relationship with quality nutrition that fuels you, sustains your body, and maintains or achieves the type of body composition you're after. That sweet spot feels like where you are. How did you manage that journey yourself?
Yeah, it's probably in a few different stages, um, and how that came around. But definitely the first part of it was when I started competing in strongman and training for that, and having a solely performance orientated goal that isn't actually doesn't really matter how much I weighed. And I didn't have to worry about it too much, like I was in the opens, I was, base, I'm over 105 kilos. So, I was in the big boy group, and, and they, it was just eat to recover, eat to train, and focus on that. And you take away that focus to nutrition on such a high level when you could just focusing on performing. And when you're training so much, it's going to kind of even out anyway, and you're on your feet all day and so on. I think the next step was then doing like my master's degree and understanding to a molecular and a biochemical level actually what's going on, and even basic principles of like thermodynamics and things like this. And which I knew, I guess, already, but like I think it gets further ingrained into you, um, to then kind of let go and to relax and understand that. And I guess it's touching on like the next point that we have is the relationship with words and relationships with food. It's actually the relationships that we have with these things that are the problem, rather than the foods themselves.
That's a great point, because there's I mean, whereas there are foods, good and bad is polarizing for foods. Better and worse, I prefer.
Agreed.
But even if you have that, you can become too dogmatic. I must not eat the bad food. I must only eat the good food. It can become
Yeah.
psychologically destructive if you're then eating the bad food and then you feel bad about it. And round we go. And we're into the obsessive area. So the bit that I think you're referring to with the next point is where for you does the core of a healthy diet that sustains performance and sustains well-being and allows someone to achieve their general body composition goals, where does that sweet spot and area lie for you? Where would you begin unpicking that one? And I realise you can't, this is not
Yeah.
individualized advice for everybody. It has to be general to a degree.
Yeah, it's such a hard question as well because it is so multifaceted. It is like everyone's so unique. Nutrition's so personal. Someone's going to be like, I'm a vegan. Someone's going to be like, I'm keto. All these kind of things, you know. So, I mean, I think really briefly touch and go a bit more into it is that terminology. It's like how we relate to food. If we say that food is fattening, no food in itself is fattening. No, nothing specifically is going to get you fat. You know, it might be higher in calories. You know, maybe it has omega-6 fats in it as well, which are pro-inflammatory. Maybe it's, you know, got more processed materials in it. Yes, you know, it might not be the most optimal food, but like, you know, you having a packet of Skips or a piece of cake or something in your day, in your week, is not going to suddenly mean that you've gained 20 pounds and you're sitting there all upset. You know, it's relating yourself to that. That's a bad food. I've eaten it. I've failed myself. And even at the other end of the spectrum where people are like, you know, clean eating, inverted commas, I'm eating clean all week. I only eat clean foods, which is really ambiguous term anyway. But then they always want a cheat day or a cheat meal, and that once again the terminology is a cheat. It's, you know, they're cheating themselves. But your main question was about having a whole overall healthy diet, weren't you, and hitting those goals. I think sorting out those words and that first, and then taking away also power from weigh-ins and things like this, looking at it as more like information and data rather than how you feel about yourself and so on. And then, and an easy way to do that is, you know, even daily or more regular weigh-ins take the power away from one singular, and you can use that just to, you know, if you go out for a meal the night before and then you weigh in the next day, you're going to be heavier. It's obvious, and you know why, you know. So, and there's so many variables that affect weight that if you just focus a bit more on the consistent and the trend, you're not empowering something that doesn't really have any control over us, just our mental attitudes towards it. And I think the last point is that sporting related bit. It's the performance. Are you performance orientated? Yes, no. I mean, even you could have like a halfway house and say, yes, kind of in the gym, but I'm not wanting to compete, and something like this. And if you have goals within that, that will help dictate how your food should be and how much you should eat. And then I think if you haven't spent time tracking, I would recommend it anyway, because I think you get a really good understanding of food. The amount of people that I work with and get them to track their food, and suddenly they're like, I didn't realize how many calories were in that, you know, specific food I ate. And I was like, yeah, it's pretty high. Or the general thing that I noticed with a lot of people is that in a Western diet in particular, it's a carbohydrate based breakfast, carbohydrate based lunch, and then dinner will be the only thing that will have mainly protein and vegetables in. The amount of people that don't even hit 5 a day is crazy. And I'm not saying you need protein, but like they're very one-dimensional diets, that can also be found to be really high in fat. I mean, you go to Pret a Manger or something like this, and the amount of fat in some of these sandwiches is ridiculous. Chicken, bacon, avocado, or whatever, you know.
As soon as you get the bacon and the mayo and the others in there. But
Yeah.
I mean, there's so many interesting points that you've already brought up there, and the one I wanted to start with was
around measurement, because
Yeah,
that resonates with me at the moment. I'm on a slightly minority group. I'm looking to put weight on at the moment, so that's my sort of. It's been a bit of a lockdown goal. A lot of ultra endurance.
yeah,
That takes the weight off.
yeah,
Like to put some on in a healthy way with some muscle. So
of course.
I've come to my fitness pal for recording what I'm eating. I've come
Yeah,
to a weekly weigh-in. That just seemed like a good idea, same time on a Friday. And that's where I'm at. Now, what I found very quickly with the calorie recording, it's really hard, especially if you make all of your own food and you don't like stick to the same 5 dishes, because everything needs programming into the app one at a time.
yeah,
But done over a period of a month, it's an awful lot of work. But something you said, you get an understanding. You
yeah,
start to see what's your protein breakdown, what's your fat breakdown, what's your calorie breakdown. So forget my experience. That's just why it resonates. My point is,
yeah.
for everyone, how would you recommend people best go about starting to get a picture to understand their diet, and what are the things they should be looking to understand? The most key basic markers to begin with.
Yeah. So I think even if you're not trying to lose weight, or if you are, body fat, so on, is if you just tracked your food for 1 to 3 months, you not changing anything necessarily straight away, you're suddenly going to see those trends really quickly. Your ability to guesstimate and eyeball a meal will improve. You're going to be able to go out and be like, you know what, actually that burger and these chips or whatever is going to be like however many calories. That meal that you've cooked that you haven't weighed or anything is going to be around maybe this many calories. And not saying that you need to know, like, count those calories in your head, but you just get an idea, because if you are trying to drop your body fat and you do create a calorie deficit and you track your food for however many months or weeks, that you'll kind of see the trend of having how much you need to have on a plate. And where maintenance might be from that is just going to be a little bit more. And the interesting thing with obviously gaining weight is you don't need that many more calories to gain muscle mass above and beyond what you're doing. It's about 200 or 300 calories additional over what maintenance is, which isn't that much really.
No,
Uh,
that's more manageable than trying to eat a whole. It's not even a whole extra meal. It's an extra snack, isn't it?
Pretty much, yeah. It's really, or like a slightly larger meal each meal you have. An extra 100 calories to each meal. It's really not much.
Tips on easy. I wrote it down. Your ability to eyeball a meal. That sums it up in terms of, you can look at it and roughly. You don't have to know. You don't have to be like the Terminator running a full calculation in your head, but just that one's got.
Yeah,
You understand the protein, fat, carb breakdown of it, and give or take where the calories are, and you understand how that fits into your goals, your day, and your week without
yeah,
too much stress. But you do have to put the hard yards in. For you were saying 1 to 3 months to be able to build that skill.
definitely. And I think it's as you've mentioned there, it's more about understanding your day rather than or your week, because if you did buy that, I don't know, pulled pork meal or something like this, that is going to be slightly higher in calories, and it's higher in calories. If you actually acknowledge that, then you're going to be like, well, I might have a slightly smaller lunch, or I might have a slightly smaller breakfast or something like this, because you're going to go out for a work lunch or something. But if you just don't care, then that's when weight can steadily, add up, because you have that meal, but then you still eat normally, and you go home and you still have your glass of wine with your dinner and so on, and that's when the calories kind of creep, and next thing you know, you've gained a bunch of weight.
So it's getting that feel for it,
Yeah,
taking a bit of time to measure and understand. And you mentioned the regularity of the weigh-in, and the idea of not using any one data point as a reaction point,
yeah,
working with the trend, if I've interpreted it correctly.
yeah, definitely.
How would you run that?
I think obviously this could be, I guess, a trigger point for certain people. If people weigh themselves and they have a trigger just doing it in general, then maybe it is better off to stay away from that. and to do things in different ways. But I think, and this is only my opinion on this, but if you do a regular weigh-in, you see trends in your weight as one thing. You know that if you did maybe a really hard session on a Sunday, like, you know, we're going to ride our bikes and things like this, you're inevitably going to eat more food. You've gone and ridden your bike for 3 or 4 hours, and there's going to be increased inflammation and water retention. Likelihood is your weight's going to go up on Monday. And suddenly you understand that and accept that. And the same thing can happen through the week for different things as well, if you have that meal out and so on. And it's once again taking that pressure off a specific weigh-in and just using that as information to go, you know, if we take out all those variables and you weighed yourself over a week and the average was exactly the same as the previous week, you know you're not in a calorie deficit or an excess. So depending on what your goal is, you can go, well, I probably need to either do a little bit more or eat a little less.
Yeah.
And that in itself just gives you that option and understanding, rather than then be reactionary and thinking, oh, my weight's gone up, I'm not doing it right, I'm failing, I'm, you know, what's the fucking point kind of thing.
So looking at that trend, it's a very similar one to growing a business. I tell you, you know, you have good weeks, you have bad weeks, but it's the trend that matters. And one thing that one of our mentors unlocked for us really early in the roller coaster of growing this business was, you've got your monthly figures, but you run a last 12-month average on all of the important ones. What the last 12-month average does, you know, for each month, that figure is the average of that number for the last 12 months, and you keep that number rolling every month. What it does is it evens out the spikes on the graph, and it gives you the trend. You can then very clearly see if the trend goes the way you want or not. Anyway, minor diversion there. I like that. It's the trend, not the individual data points. Now, talking of individual data points, that's a really nice segue into our next bit about the snapshots and the way people perceive icons, idols, people around them, friends, relatives, whatever. But just before we go there, I want to nip into a quick cul-de-sac here, because there's something that occurred to me, not related to nutrition, but I love it that you went from strongman competition, which is like as big and heavy as it can get in terms of athletes out there. There may be some pro bodybuilders who are running that circuit who are heavier, but it's going to be, we're at the heavy end of sport, right?
Yeah.
To pro cycling, which is the stick-thin, lightest end of sport, away from possibly gymnastics. Just a huge pendulum swing, and I was fascinated that you go between the two, but also not just that, you've competed seriously in strongman, and you're working seriously on cycling as well.
Yeah. It was a bit of a drastic change for sure. I mean, I enjoyed strongman and powerlifting and that kind of aspect of sport myself personally, but then nutritionally, it was, you know, endurance sport and cycling in specific that really, or ultra endurance sport in specific that I really love, because from a nutritionist point of view, when someone's riding 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 hours and they're doing it day on day, that's really interesting, because suddenly my influence on that day and on that race is huge. Whereas for more like powerlifting and strongman sports, it's not as interesting. They kind of just eat what they want. But I mean, I was quite a light strongman at 117, 118 kilos. So not super heavy, but, you know, I had the areas that I was good at. And when I made that, you know, change to pro cycling and professional sport and working within that, I obviously started riding more myself, and I ended up competing in some time trials and things like this, which was good fun, and training for certain events as well. But it's interesting within that, like, being an athletic guy, I still have people telling me, you know, you're a bit big to ride, aren't you? And stuff like this, you know, which is kind of crazy.
Well, I think we come on to external comments, shall we say, a little further on in our chat. But no, I was just fascinated with that journey there, and it's interesting that in a way you're right. From someone who has a passion to work in nutrition, then there's a huge amount more going on, simply because of the longer duration of the sport. And then when you come into the fact that, you know, body composition plays a key part in power to weight ratio, then I guess there's a lot more there. Was it that interest in it as from a sort of scientific and nutritional point of view that drew you more into trying out cycling as a sport, or do you think you'd have got there anyway just because you've done so many different sports as it is?
Oh, it's an interesting question. It's really good. I found my passion for cycling again when I was 21 or 2, where I bought my first adult bike again, and me and my friend decided on a whim to ride back from Spain to England. I didn't train for it. I think the biggest ride I did was about 2 hours, and felt really chuffed with myself. And went over to Spain on the ferry, and then my first day I did like a 65-mile ride or something with like all my bags and camping gear on me, and it was definitely baptism by fire for sure. But yeah, I got through it, and I found this passion for riding for sure, and that was the early part of me being into nutrition, and obviously seeing that effect directly on me, and I think that's what initially started it.
That's a strong shout. I mean, some people I've heard of similar stories. Like my reintroduction to cycling was a similar one, but it wasn't quite as extreme. Mine was, we were going to ride from, I don't know, somewhere in the Alps to the south coast of France, but we were taking a van and there were a few of us. It was just a kind of boys' adventure, really, but it had moved on a bit from the days of simply drinking too much and falling over, and it now involved bicycles, and that was the sort of turning point for me there.
Yeah.
But you didn't, literally, right, we're going to go as far away as we can, and it only ends when we've cycled home. There's no way out there. You had to do it.
Yeah, pretty much. It was we had a ferry booked already as well, so we didn't really have a choice. Otherwise, we were going to get, have to buy another ticket and get stranded. But yeah, it was good fun. Just free camped the whole way and just enjoyed the riding once I settled into it and I wasn't in agony. But
as the body adapts. So, all right. Well, let's get back into the. We'll come off the holiday story. I love that. And that could fill up another show on its own. But we were talking about snapshots of pro cyclists. Let's use them as an example. You're nutritionist for EF Pro Cycling. This is your world. These guys are running insanely low body fat, insanely low body weight, while bringing out insanely high power. People can look at those and go, to cycle, I must look like that and be successful. And a point you made when we talked about it is, well, yes and no. What you're looking at when you see any rider in a Grand Tour is a snapshot. Could you just talk a little more about that? Because I really like that point.
Completely. Like, guys who are going to be contending for Grand Tours know it pretty much from the season start. That, a few of them will be told that they're on the list or something like this, so they know where their season's going. So they have an idea of what that whole season looks like. And obviously the course will already be out, so certain riders will be picked for certain races based upon the course. And they will train their whole year to peak. They are going to peak for that race, and they will get their leanest for that race. They will get in the best shape they possibly can for that race. And, it's easily mentioned or forgotten, that when they're getting to that point, they're at their most vulnerable. The most likely they're going to get ill is in the lead up to that, because their intensity and training volume is the highest. They're getting their leanest. They are in a calorie deficit. That potential and already increased incidence of upper respiratory tract infections and things like this is higher in endurance sport anyway. It is there. So, this is really a snapshot for them to perform in the hardest cycling race in the world with the best cyclists in the world. So, for sure, that's like the biggest snapshot you can have in that sport, to be honest. And people look at it, and we spoke about it before, like Froome posting a 6-hour fasted ride and having just I think it was just eggs and avocado or something before it, and people were like, that's what I need to do. I need to ride 6 hours and I need to eat barely anything, and forget that this guy's literally spent his whole life training to be able to do that. And
it's also it's such a it is a funny one. It's a natural human tendency. You know, you follow your idols. You look up to people who are successful at what you do. You want to see what you can learn from them. But sometimes the picture is not entirely helpful, because you're absolutely right. Whereas in a rarefied environment in the first place, I mean, Tour de France isn't just the hardest bike race. It's got to be one of the hardest races in the world, period.
Yeah.
You also lose sight of the fact that everyone there, how many national champions, world champions, previous tour winners, multiple Olympians, you know, or they've dominated in another sport, whether it's cross-country skiing or whatever, before they come there. Like, these are the best of the best of the best of the best, the last of that 0.1% in any sport. You've got that. You've then got this person, and what they're doing for the most extreme race of their career, it probably isn't what the rest of us should necessarily then go out and do. It's not representative.
Yeah. Really interesting point, actually, I just thought about, based upon what you're saying there and what we're speaking about, was obviously possibly a touchy subject, but vegan athletes. And it was like Serena Williams becoming vegan, and other big star athletes like this becoming vegan. And people are like, oh, they're doing it, I can do it, kind of thing. And they need to realize that also that person has a nutritionist. That person has a team of people guiding, educating, and helping them maintain a healthy diet. Imagine the regularity that Serena Williams gets on bloods. And the same with NFL players and whoever else is vegan, that is a top level athlete that's earning millions and millions of pounds a year. They're going to be getting their bloods done regularly. They're going to know where their vitamin B12 levels are, things like this. You know, they're not going to be underperforming because they're vegan. You know, whereas, average Joe and Joanne, who's like, I'll be vegan. And then suddenly a year down the line, there's some issues because, they haven't been, filling in those gaps that it does have.
You're absolutely right. It's a difficult, on the one hand, for someone on an average diet, if they were to put a little attention in, they may see an improvement on a vegan diet simply because it's removed a lot of poor foods they were previously eating. It's not because they've gone vegan, it's because they're now just eating a higher quality diet through being conscious of it. That may upgrade because you're coming from a very low level. But on the other hand, there's no way you can have that level of insight that a professional athlete would have into their body, into what's going on. And vegan doesn't mean healthy. I mean, let's face it, there's an awful lot of junk food out there. Chips are vegan, so are crisps. So you can eat chips and Pringles all day long and you're vegan. Doesn't mean you're healthy.
I work with a lot of athletes like that. They come to me with vegan. Standard meal was like bread, hummus and avocado or something like this.
And a lot of, chips always make the list, as do, I think there's a lot of sort of tofu-y type burgers out there and sausages and things like that. If you're swapping one processed food for another, you're not really moving in the right direction.
No, definitely. But like you said, with these things, short-term gain and becoming vegan, if you can't eat anything else other than vegetables, all you eat is vegetables, you're going to feel better short-term, for sure. But do that for a year, 2 years, that's when I get a lot of vegans coming to me. A year down the line, they're training quite a lot. They are an athlete, whatever your spectrum of athlete is. But like if they're training, 10 hours or so a week doing endurance sport and being vegan, suddenly, they're coming to me and they're saying they've had a stress fracture or they've, had whatever else. It's like, oh, well, let's have a little look,
Well, that brings us back to where we were earlier in the conversation, that understanding of being able to eyeball a meal. And to understand, give or take, where you're at in your week, your day, your training cycle, where you're at in your macros in terms of what you've eaten, and the overall well-being. But then you're absolutely right, you get into the fine-tuning part. Do you find that on the vegan side, people can become dogmatic? And I think this applies to keto as well. As soon as you get more, let's say, more focused on the dietary side, it can, for some people, just become a badge. I am keto or I am vegan. Yeah. At which point they're into a bit of a quandary themselves. Well, I can't not go outside that, but I don't feel great. Do you see that?
Yeah, it's interesting how it becomes like a tagline on people's Instagrams and things like this. Vegan, like it defines them as a person.
Yeah.
If you want to be vegan, cool, all good. I think if you never said that you were vegan either, and I mean, obviously it depends on the reasons. I'm not vegan, so it's quite hard to say. But like, as soon as you define that you are vegan, you have then pigeonholed yourself and saying you have to live a certain way or eat a certain way, and that doesn't give you that flexibility. If you just ate like a vegan but didn't say anything, then if you went to Thailand, if you went to a country where veganism isn't really a thing, you're not suddenly going to struggle and try and stick to something that's just unrealistic in certain places, and so on, I think.
Which comes back to the healthy approach to the whole business of eating and looking after yourself, which doesn't go down the overly focused on weighing the meal, overly focused on, too much, too little, whatever it may be. But you've also, it's almost like you're laying the path for me here. This is amazing. You've brought up Instagram, you've brought up the hashtags. Well, funnily enough, that's where we're going next, because in the world of Instagram and hashtags, there's a lot of nutritional advice out there. And, let's just say, for example, someone from Love Island, again, they're sponsored by some brand, and now people are getting their nutritional advice there. Others are getting it in Runner's World. Others are getting it from the Daily Mail. There's more advice than ever out there on nutrition, and I think generally that's a good thing. I'm going to use the example I saw this morning of a 12-year-old kid doing the most amazing balance point wheelie on a mountain bike without thinking. For balance point, what I'm talking about there, for anyone who's not familiar, that's the point where the bike is perfectly balanced. It's neither tipping backwards nor tipping forwards, and it no longer requires acceleration or braking to maintain the wheelie. So this kid's just riding through traffic on the back wheel. In the 1980s, when I was into BMX, we had to wait, right? Once a month, a magazine came out, and we could learn a new trick once a month. And maybe with my 3 mates that we BMX with, we could learn the trick together. We might occasionally get to a park and meet other kids who did it. What I'm getting at is the speed of learning was so slow because the information flow was so slow. Yeah. Now, this 12-year-old kid has been able to watch 20 videos of other kids like him doing it, seen it's totally possible, watched a tutorial, met 5 mates who can do it, and in a month, he's done something that a pro BMXer in the 1980s would have taken 2 years to do. There might not have even been anyone who could do it. It would be an amazing trick if someone could do it. Anyway, I'll get off the BMX thing. Like I said, a lot of stuff out there on nutrition is helpful. People are able to be more conscious. They're able to speed up that pace of learning. But it comes at a price. There's a lot of confusion because everyone says something different. And this is where we wanted to go with this is from your point of view, how can people begin to navigate the sea of information that's out there and sift helpful from unhelpful, what works for them from what not works for them, what to listen to, what not to listen to? And again, huge question this, but where would you begin navigating those waters?
Oh, it's massively tough, isn't it? Because I think, me personally, and as a scientist, you need to be objective, and you need to sit on the fence with anything, because keto does work for certain things. Maybe type 2 diabetics or someone with epilepsy or something like this. There are points where it is good. Even look at the 4-man rowing team that won the Atlantic Ocean row race. I think it was last year. They were on keto. And I was nearly going to do my PhD on something like that. But nonetheless, there are sometimes something where that could be useful. But if there is a general article about keto, people are suddenly going to think that's for me. I should do that. And because it's easy to take something, especially with rules. Because if it's got rules, it's easier. It controls something. And so many people want to have something and then not really, like, quick fixes, isn't it? Like if someone gives you a meal plan, it's easy to go, if I follow that meal plan, I lose weight. I don't have to think about that anymore. Whereas, and I think it's similar with all these different articles and things that people read, is there's so much misinformation and information out there that, like, it's easy to just pick something or not truly understand everything about it, and is it applicable for them? So they end up just doing loads of different things or not sure about any of them, or picking one that just maybe goes with their tendencies, which is that control factor. without really considering maybe other things.
Can there be an element of, with so much information, you can fall into the trap of try everything, try nothing, as in nothing ever gets a good enough crack of the whip for you to ever see whether it worked or not, or too many variables are changed at once, so you can't tell what helped.
Yeah. The variables one's quite an interesting one, because that the amount of people that do a little bit of a diet and it's like it's a miracle thing, they've lost all that weight and like it's a thing for everyone, but there could be loads of factors that have gone with that. Maybe they also started exercising at the same time, and they also started going for a walk every day, and maybe they've actually getting better sleep. We know that sleep can affect the weight loss dramatically. There was a great study that looked at comparing 5.5 hours sleep to 8.5 hours sleep, and how the 5.5 hours sleep lost barely any fat and lost muscle instead. Whereas the people who had 8.5 hours sleep lost considerable amounts of fat and barely lost any muscle. That was just purely on sleep alone. There's loads of factors like this that can affect it. And I think with all this stuff, if people are really serious and really struggling, and I think struggling is the main word here, that they should contact a professional. There are professionals for a reason. They are good at what they do. You don't hire someone to build a brick wall that's never built one before. You shouldn't hire even like the 6-week PT qualified in 6-week PT. Get a proper professional to help you, guide you, and even then, just you'd have to look at their credentials, and obviously their governing bodies and stuff will help you decide if they're good enough or not. But I think that's probably how you should think about it.
I mean, is there something as simple as, because I think deep down, if people are serious about changes and let's just say improving their nutrition, people pretty much know what's good and what's bad. But maybe certain articles and influences allow a justification of the things that deep down you probably shouldn't be eating a lot of that. It's probably not going to work. Or if it's meant to work in 2 weeks and you're going to lose 3 stone, unlikely to be that good for you, probably doesn't work. Do you think that deep down there is a consciousness, people go, yeah, actually, I know what's right and what's wrong?
Yeah, it's interesting, isn't it? Like people instinctively know I should eat 5 a day, but they don't. That's that. I think that's the biggest and easiest one to pinpoint as well. Everyone knows fruit and vegetables are great for you. Like, why don't they eat more of them? And obviously, I understand cost. It is definitely a factor for certain families and people. But it's easy to see that. Yeah.
And if you then go to the bringing in the professionals, great idea. If you've reached a point, you understand where you're at. Yeah, I have a training goal, I have this goal. Why not bring in a nutritionist? And you were talking about qualifications and things like that. I mean, again, is there a way of sifting? Because presumably it's as much a personal relationship as it is a professional one.
Yeah, completely, because it's obviously a coaching process. So someone's ability to coach you is going to be on that buy-in. It's going to be on your relationship with them, which is important, because if you don't like them, you're not really going to want to do something for them, I guess, in a way, because it kind of becomes a relationship like that. But there are registers out there. You obviously got the dietetics register or registered dietitians, and then you have in my industry, the Sport and Exercise Nutrition Register, which is with the British Dietetics Association. But people don't really know about these registers. But like, if you look at any professional job, any job with good standing will require you to be on that kind of register as a minimum, because it defines what level of nutritionist you are, because you need to be a certain level to be on that register. And that's probably where you'd start looking, for these kinds of people.
Makes sense, that. So Sports and Exercise Nutrition Register, is that SENR?
Yeah, SENR.
There we go. Okay, so we'll put a link to that one in the show notes as well, so people can find that. And just to round this one up, I think one other thing we touched on that I really enjoyed in our earlier chat was the idea that people will, when they learn what you do in the gym or out on the bike or whatever, they'll ask you questions, but they won't always won't always necessarily appreciate the advice they've then asked to be given. Can you deconstruct that a little bit? Because it was quite fun.
Yeah, I don't even know why people do this, if I'm honest. Like, because I gave the example of a guy in the gym talking to me. We'd been chatting a couple of times. I'd seen him there. And he asked what I did finally. And I said, I'm a nutritionist. And I was waiting for it. And he was like, and then he brought up his diet and started telling me about what he was doing. And he was telling me how he was doing intermittent fasting, but was wanting to gain muscle mass. And he said, well, what do you think about this? And then I told him, well, if you're trying to gain muscle mass, what is optimal and the best thing to do would probably be to have more regular protein feedings. So you're being more anabolic or in a position to grow more muscle more frequently through the day. And he was like, nah, I'm all right. And told me I'm wrong. And he was like, you didn't want to do it. And I was just like, but I don't understand. Like, you asked my opinion as a professional and you're obviously allowed to disregard it, but it's how upfront people are about it, and I went on and tell you, I've been on other like YouTube videos and stuff like this, and people have put in the comments outright saying I'm wrong. And I'm like, I think I said to you, I've spent my whole career studying and trying to understand nutrition to a biochemical level, and someone read a blog post somewhere and said I'm wrong. It's so interesting how people can do that for nutrition, but not really for anything else.
Well, that was the point you made. It was unlikely that someone's going to look at Jurgen Klopp's strategy for Liverpool or whatever and go, nah, he's wrong.
Yeah. It's so true. I think for even so many different industries, it would be the same. Like, a builder tells you it's got to be done like this. If you know nothing about building, you'd say, all right, yeah.
You don't go, no, you're wrong, I'm going to do it with this bit of
exactly.
2b4 and a nail, it'd be fine.
Yeah, exactly. It's a funny one for sure.
Food's a personal thing. I mean, it's something that Erica and myself learned early on in our own journey into nutrition, which began like 10 years ago. You start, people ask you about it, and you tell them what you've learned and how you want it, because you want to help them. But we very quickly realised you don't bring it up unless someone asks, because otherwise people can get freaked out by it. Even at going to dinner at people's houses, sometimes we have to make sure we're the ones who take the chocolate and the alcohol. Otherwise, people think it must just all have to be like salad and beans and fruit and mineral water. It's like, no, we're having dinner on a Friday night.
Yeah, I know. It's funny. I think coming back to a previous point about diets and all this information as well is something I forgot, but I was going to bring up was that the idea that being able to eat a bit of everything and lose weight is alien. Like you can't just have a normal, inverted commas, diet that has a bit of cake, that has a bit of ice cream, that has some alcohol, that has fruit and vegetables, that has all these different things, but can help you achieve your goals. Seems like such an outlandish thing. And even that got pigeonholed into if it fits your macros, and how suddenly it's coined that, and that means you can eat all the cake and things that you want as long as you're in your macros, which is also absurd. Why does it have to be any of these things?
As in you've satisfied your carbohydrate requirement through ice cream, therefore you're all right, as long as you don't go above the number of grams of carb.
Yeah, exactly. And if you hit all your macros, despite where it comes from, you'll drop weight, which obviously isn't true. Like, it is true in that you'll drop body fat levels, but like, are you going to be the healthiest person long term? Probably not, because micronutrients are really important. If you hit the macros, you should preserve your muscle mass, and if you're doing it properly anyway, and you should have the energy and stuff like this, but it doesn't mean you'll feel fullest or you'll have the best energy levels, or long-term health levels as well will be the best.
I think that's a huge point, that there is a short-term ability to maintain macros through unhealthy foods, yet the long-term ability of that is likely to be negative for your health. And if it's negative over a 5 to 10 year timeline, the chance of it actually being beneficial today is not that high either. It's not like it's good for a year and then it goes bad. No, the bad starts now. It's just going to get worse.
Yeah, it's so true. Yeah.
So you've got your PhD coming up. Now, you said you were looking at the rowers, the keto rowers, but you didn't go with those. What's the PhD about? Is that something you can share with us?
Yeah. So I actually, so I applied for a PhD November last year and got a conditional offer. But then when I got my job with EF Pro Cycling, the World Tour team, I decided to switch to a DProf, which is a Doctor of Profession, which means it's not as lab based. It's more about your actual job and what you actually do and how you interact with those people, and then writing and providing still research that will improve my profession rather than improving the body of research out there on a specific subject, which is what I'm going to do in professional cycling, as you may have guessed.
That's brilliant. But I think one of the areas where it is hard in the world of nutrition, maybe in a lot of worlds, it's just the one I'm more familiar with, the translation from lab to real world. Lab results can be X. Implementation. I mean, I think, in fact, it was one of your keto videos I saw. You mentioned the ketone esters in there. Might have a great potential for some people in certain occasions, but as your interviewee said, tastes like drinking nail polish. Therefore, you're going to have a compliance issue once you go from lab to real world.
Yeah, definitely. I've worked with guys that have taken that and have performed worse because they're practically throwing up because it tastes so vile. It may improve performance. Their studies weren't fully conclusive. Not every single study improved performance. Some did, but obviously at that level, if it might work, they're going to take it.
Yeah,
for sure. And it's obviously legal at the moment, so why wouldn't they? If they've got the budget anyway, it's atrociously expensive.
Yeah, it's an interesting thing, and I say on its own, along with several of the other topics today, possibly not the BMXing and wheelies, but several others that you brought up that were a lot more in depth. We could have gone down tons of those. I'd look forward very much to doing another one of these, but I love the fact that with your next stage of study, that is the DProf with the full real world application, because that's got to be the place. It also makes sense with your own path. The cycling was most interesting because it was the place where you could achieve the most at the coalface.
Yeah.
Now bring that into the study as well. That feels like it would suit you even better than the lab anyway.
Yeah, definitely. I'm always wanted to blah blah blah. Did so well there. Being a practitioner is what I'm passionate about. Working with people, improving actual performance on the field. While lab-based stuff is good, and I've had abstracts published, I looked at carbohydrate dosage and frequency, and its effect on endurance cycling performance, which is what I was going to do the PhD on, mixed with the rowing as well. But it's interesting that you brought that up about that translation of lab to real life, because this is going to be about a quantification of a World Tour cyclist's life, and it's gone a bit further into that and comparing different styles of riders within a team, because obviously you have guys who are your climbers and your GC riders, the guys that are going to win the tours, and then you've got your domestique riders who are going to be your guys that pretty much sit on the front and just ride as hard as they can to get the guys who win the race there. And they're very different riders. A GC rider is going to be around 60 kilos, 60, 65 kilos. He's light, he's small. And a domestique rider is going to be around 75 to 80 kilos, which is a massively different in the sport of cycling anyway.
Huge difference.
Yeah, and it's looking at their seasons and how their seasons differ, and other factors as well, like the amount of travel that a cyclist has to do over a year is obscene. Similar to like Formula One sport as well. But you look at footballers and they only have to travel within a country, mostly, and might have a private jet probably for it. Whereas these guys have to go to loads of different hotels. They have to fly all over different time zones. it's a massive influence. It affects sleep, obviously chances of illness, incidence of illness, all these.
There's got to be a huge element in there. It feels like, in some respects, particularly since Team Sky brought the marginal gains thing, that's now common parlance for everybody. It feels like, well, there can't be any gains left. But as you start to unravel the variables in a professional cyclist's life, there's hundreds. There's a lot of stuff that's not being looked at. Sounds fascinating.
Yeah, definitely. Like, I mean, even if you look at flying in itself, there's a great study. I can't remember the guy's name, to be honest, but he was from Bath University, and I got lectured by him, and he was talking about his research into the cortisol response rate to flying, and the process of going on a plane and flying increases your cortisol response and your stress response on the body. That increases your chance of getting ill. That alone, not even looking at the potential cross-contamination and all this stuff.
Simply being on the plane.
Simply taking a flight increases your stress response and your potential to getting ill.
And do we know, getting super geeky now, if that is due to the fact that flying is unnatural, therefore deep down we haven't done it for millions of years, so actually even if we think we're calm, we're not? Or B, being in a tin can at 10,000 feet surrounded by tons of radiation and everything else is going to affect things? Or is it a bit of both?
It's probably a bit of both. It's probably like the stress of getting up early because you've tried to get that early flight, that you then get there and you got to go through security. You got to make sure you're on time. You got to look for all these different things. Then you're getting hustled and crammed into the plane itself, which isn't comfortable because, especially if you're a bigger person, it's crap. And you probably got someone sitting next to you that you don't even like and maybe smells, all this kind of stuff. It's all just making you stressed, and that response rate is just coming all the way up. And then now you are potentially open to more infection, or that potential is greater because of that. And now you're also breathing in that air conditioned air that everyone's sharing. You're also touching loads of things that everyone's touching, and so on. And that's why people do get ill.
And then it was a point someone made to me about a year ago. Stress is stress. Doesn't matter whether it's training, work, life, missing a plane, whatever it may be. It's stress on the body, and you need to absorb that before you can improve in any area. Yeah,
completely. The body responds in a similar way. Cortisol goes up, and the stress hormone is secreted. So, like, whatever that stress is, it's still affecting you in a similar way. Other things that will come with it may be different, because obviously with exercise there are obviously other beneficial effects that maybe compound that, like serotonin release and the feeling of it, and obviously muscle inflammation and so on. But yeah, it's pretty interesting.
Well, I think maybe after you're finished with this next batch of study, it could be time to introduce the turbo onto the back of the plane.
Yeah.
Enough of the before and after races. That's just been done. Let's get it on the plane, and maybe there's something in that. But let's see what the results say.
Yeah. I think so.
Well, thank you so much again for making the time today. I don't want to hold you up anymore because I know that the sun is properly shining. It's about as hot as it's going to be. So clearly that must be the ultimate moment for you to be getting out on your bike now.
Oh yeah, you got to go out in the hottest part of the day, otherwise you're not doing it properly, right?
Best of luck with that. And just, let's do a quick one. You're going out; it's a hot ride. What's on the bike? What's in the jersey? How do you run your nutrition on the bike? This is a pure bit of focus geekery here.
Oh yeah, that's good. So I've already started hydrating. I've been hydrating all morning to make sure that I'm going to go out in a hydrated state, which is more important than making sure you're hydrated on the bike in particular. If you start hydrated or start dehydrated, you're never going to be that great. So yeah, hydrating before I even go out. I'll have a meal, which I have had, which is 2 hours beforehand to make sure I'm adequately fueled. And I'm only going to do 2 hours, so I'll probably do that on nothing. Just 2 bottles of water, so a bottle an hour, which is pretty typical.
Perfect. Cue indignant keto comments immediately.
Yeah, exactly. But if you're doing efforts maybe in your 2 hours, like some hard work, you could probably add in, I don't know, some dates and a banana or something.
But bite to eat when you come in after that one, or cruise through to dinner?
Yeah, I would have some protein because after 2 hours, it'd been 4 hours since my last protein feed, and it would be an adequate time to have some protein. I'd have a real food choice though. I won't have a shake or anything like this.
What's your go-to real food protein this afternoon? We'll take one last nugget from your mine of information.
Yeah, sure. Sea bass. Super quick. Cook it in the pan in 5 minutes whilst you're doing your microwave rice and your microwave tender stem steamed broccoli. It's super easy. It will take me literally 7 or 8 minutes to cook, and it's still decent. Yeah.
Perfect. Well, look, that sounds like a great afternoon. Enjoy that one. Thanks so much for joining me on the show today. Really enjoyed it. Look forward to another one.
My absolute pleasure, and I would look forward to coming back as well. Thank you very much.
Will Girling, ladies and gentlemen, give that man a great big round of applause. Really hope you enjoyed that one. Thank you for joining us here on the show. Look forward to having you back for another one soon. Whatever you do now, don't do anything before you've gone to 33fuel.com and got yourself some of the world's finest natural sports nutrition. Look forward to seeing you next time.